This is where Roy Angelo lives today. In the 1867 photo we have of this structure, it was known as the Fish family home. And if you notice the chimney on the left side, you will see Captain Troop's steam sawmill down on the slip next to the Yacht Club house. This house was the home of a local fisherman, Leon Boss. In the 1920s he caught sturgeon, shipping them to New York City and receiving as much as $1.50 a pound when other fish were selling for 5 cents a pound. This is what was known as the inner harbor here. The small lake schooners used to come up to this warehouse to load and unload. That was Pallister's warehouse, built in around the late 1850s. If you notice the height of it, it was high enough so that they could bring grain up on the second floor and put it through chutes down into the holds of the small lake schooners. This is the bridge that passes over Mill Street. If you notice the rise here on either side where the bridge is, that was formerly the old dam. The dam which was constructed by the land company back in 1805 by Samuel Troop, who later became the father of Captain Horatio Nelson Troop, the famous navigator that came from Pultneyville. This dam was breached around 1825, and a new dam was built further upstream. At the time this dam was functioning, there was a mill on either side of the creek. On one side there was a grist mill, and then on the other side a sawmill. And it's interesting to note, as you look at the old account book of Samuel Troop, you can tell when the various families came to town and what stage they were in building their home, their barns, or even building some of their furniture. This is the site here where Mill Street passes over the old dam, which was constructed in 1805. We have a number of comparison shots of this site. One is the same scene as it was in 1864. Another as it was in 1908. If you will look in the flat where the mill pond was, you will see where the old foundry and later Derby's machine shop was located. Also around 1826, the old cider mill and vinegar factory was constructed and used to around 1900. The Salmon Creek house was formerly the home of the Dunning family, constructed in the 1860s. Prior to that, the property was in the possession of the Pallister family, who lived next door. The Dunnings were sailors. In fact, some of them went whaling with the Roy's family from Pultneyville. The Salmon Creek house is an example of some of the only mercantile activity that is left in the community. We find this in the commercial zone, which is from the corner store around to the firehouse on Washington Street. This is the home of Captain John Pallister, who was a whaler, as were many of the early villagers. Captain Mervyn Pallister and his brother Albert were his sons. They owned the vessel, the Fred L. Wells, with Pultneyville its home port, and they also owned the warehouse. On the lake end of Mill Street, we have several homes. The one in the foreground was Captain William Lever's home, and this was the home of Captain Mervyn Pallister. This is the CRAGGS mansion, built by the local miller, James CRAGGS. His mill was not here on Mill Street, but it was up on the corner of Salmon Creek Road and Hamilton Street. He was a local miller here for many years, and when he constructed this place, he sent to England for 2 carpenters to do some of the more delicate work on the inside. If you notice here, above the windows, you see the lintels, and you see the windowsills, and you see the water table there, limestone that come into the area here by boat from St. Catharines, Ontario. The bricks coming in from Canada, also by boat. The Demanda family bought this property back in the late 1930s, and they have lived here ever since. They've made many improvements on the grounds, done a great deal of landscaping, and kept the old house just as it always was. Pig Lane has a distinctive name. I would say that it's probably one of the only few streets in the country with a name as that, such as that. Here we have residence on Pig Lane. This is the only residence in the village that has the distinctive address of Pig Lane. It formerly was Captain Troop's ice house, and it was moved here and made a residence in the early 1900s. Many times the question is asked, why Pig Lane? And so as near as we can figure out, you would see the places over on Washington Street all back up to Pig Lane. So the residents all face Washington Street. The barns were at the rear of the residence, and the pig pens were on the rear of the barn. So when you walk down this public right-of-way that went from J Street to Mill Street, you would be in the company of all the pigs of the people who lived on Washington Street. As we come down Pig Lane, we find the property of the late Captain Troop. His barn and backyard are much the same as they were 100 years ago. But the ice house has been moved next door, and the pigs are missing. One of the more historic spots that back up to Pig Lane is the Captain John Palmer home, which we see here. This was one of the stopping places in the Underground Railroad. But as we look at this place here, it wasn't always this way. If we notice the frontispiece on the rear of this home, formerly that faced the street, or Washington Street. Around 1860, the house was turned around and the brick portion was put on the front. Captain John Palmer was one of the prominent lake captains, and he was active in the lake shipping. Therefore, he was one of Captain Troop's men who used to take the fugitive slaves and take them from the pier here in Pultneyville across Lake Ontario into Canada and freedom. This scene has no significance. It is not an archaeological dig or no ancient stone monument such as Stonehenge, but the almost end result of a sewer project. The BORNARTH home at the corner of J Street and Pig Lane was the home of Samuel Owens. In the 1867 photo, this portion was moved back and turned, and the new two-story portion added to the front. The Henry Griffin house is an old residence on J Street. Henry Griffin was a local merchant having a store over on the waterfront. We have a number of pictures taken of this residence back in 1872. And if you compare these old photographs with the building as it is today, you will see that it has changed very little. The home of John and Carol Selsey at the time of this 1867 photo was the home of Thomas Quaife, stage driver for Wells and Gates Line from Palmera to Pultneyville. The old Arnold Dunning home at the northwest corner of Pig Lane and J Street is now the home of Dr. James and Ann Burke. This is looking down J Street to the site of the old cobblestone blacksmith shop.